I'm gonna play a game today. One that I've never tried before. All I have to do is pick one from my extensive backlog. This should be easy. Just have to choose a game. Do you struggle to choose what games to play? Do you have a backlog so insurmountable that looking through it is exhausting? Do you wish there would stop being so many banger new indie games all the damn time? Well, I've got just the solution for you. Presenting a wheel. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How does a wheel solve this? A little closer. You see those? Games. Now watch. And there you have it, a game selected for you by the whims of chance. Now play it.
What, like right now?
Right now.
Okay.
In Grapple Dog, you play as a dog that has a grappling hook. The game starts with Pablo and a couple of his friends traveling to a remote island that rumors say contained the secrets of the Great Inventor, a character you only hear through legend. As you walk through the island, you encounter a giant robot that suddenly turns on and pummels the ground, causing you to fall to your death. When you come to your senses, you're greeted by a floating robot head who goes by Null. They guide you through the tutorial section and ask that you open a big-ass chest for them, to which you agree as Null does not have hands. That being said, Pablo also does not use his hands to open the chest, instead standing in front of it as it magically opens itself. In the chest is the quintessential mechanic of the game, the grappling hook. With it, you can swing left and right to gain momentum to reach places your measly little jump could only dream of, as well as reposition up and down. There is a catch though, which is that you're limited on where you can use the grapple, so you're only able to attach to these blue crystal blocks. Well, that and balloons, cannons, conveyors, spinny things. At first it felt a little underwhelming, but looking back, I think it was necessary to limit the grapple, since it would trivialize a lot of the pacing of the levels, and potentially make them feel too freeform. And there's still plenty of moments where you can zoom through sections. Anyways, once you obtain the grapple, Null asks for one more favor, which is to open this big door with a red X over it. Pablo hesitates a little, but ultimately decides to do it. And you're not gonna believe this, but Null was actually evil the whole time! Behind the door was the rest of his body, and as soon as he gets it back, he unleashes an army of robots and sets his plan into motion. While this is happening, Pablo drowns to death. He's saved by one of his crewmates, Tony, and once they reconvene, Pablo vows to save the world, and this is where your journey begins. The game is a collectathon, so in every level there's 250 oranges and 5 purple gems, 3 of which are scattered throughout the level, and 2 that you get for collecting enough oranges. On top of this, a few levels in each world have a badge that unlocks a bonus level when collected, and every level has a time trial mode that unlocks after beating it normally. So as far as stuff to do goes, this game's got it. Unfortunately, the core of the platforming genre, the movement, is a mixed bag here. Grappling is definitely the highlight, and improving at it does feel rewarding, but it's pretty disjointed from all the other platforming you'll be doing. The regular running and jumping is a lot slower than the grappling sections, but it's still pretty fun, although it's got some quirks, like how running is something you have to charge up by walking for a couple seconds, which never felt right, and while falling, even the slightest nudge will move you way too far in whichever direction you're moving, which led to lots of hits that felt out of my control. I have a couple issues with the grappling as well, although it's mostly because of the things the grapple interacts with, rather than the grapple itself. For example, some mechanics that get introduced later are cycle-based, so you end up spending a lot more time preparing to swing than actually swinging. I personally didn't enjoy when this became more prevalent, as it considerably slows down the pacing. I understand the need to add more elements to keep things from getting stale, but I would have hoped to see more mechanics that encourage speed. The grapple also feels pretty unwieldy at times, especially in the first couple hours of playing, since you can only shoot it straight up or at a 45-degree angle, making a lot of otherwise simple sections feel cumbersome, but this did get better as I played. There's also an issue of some sections feeling way too automatic in juxtaposition to the normally flowy gameplay, since you have these cannons and balloons that you get automatically pulled up into when you grapple towards. There's too many sections where you just get shot through a few cannons and then resume normal gameplay. There definitely should have been something more to it, like having to time a button press or something similar. I believe the collectathon aspect contributed to the slower pace throughout most levels, given that you usually have to go back and forth a lot to collect all the oranges, which I didn't mind. There's a simple joy in doing that, but I think another approach could have benefited it a lot. Honestly, if the oranges were removed entirely and there were instead more purple gems that involved going for more challenging sections or thoroughly exploring each level, that would have been great. The time trial mode especially made this more apparent to me, since it removes all the collectibles and ended up being more enjoyable because of that. Another aspect that I felt pretty mixed on was the boss fights. The first one was probably my favorite, since it was basically the first boss from Super Meat Boy that chases after you, but you attack it. For most of them though, they're very slow or just not super engaging, but at the very least, each boss has a regular level you get to play before. And after you beat a boss level, the game splits the two sections up, so you can replay the level without having to do the entire boss again, and vice versa, which is actually a great quality of life feature that I haven't seen done before. The highlight of this game, though, absolutely has to be the final world, which you unlock after beating the final fight against Noel. It only consists of 3 levels, but they're a lot longer and have tons of gameplay variety. I really enjoyed them. I haven't mentioned the non-gameplay stuff yet, so I'll start with the soundtrack. It's pretty alright, but it gets far too repetitive far too quickly. Each world sticks to using one song for each level, and the tracks are only about a minute and a half long, so you're going to hear the same stuff a lot. I had to turn it off when going back to 100% the game. Again, it's a totally serviceable set of tracks, I just wish there was a bit more to listen to throughout. And hey, even if I may be sick of the music, I'll say that the visuals are great. It fits the vibe of the game perfectly. The colors are super pleasant, and everything just feels clean. Overall, I enjoyed my time with Grapple Dog, but I wish it focused more on the grappling mechanic in ways that encourage going fast, rather than slowing you down. It's still a fun time regardless, and I think the friend that recommended it to me put it best. Great casual experience, not recommended to those looking for the nuance and challenge found in games like Celeste, but what it lacks in nuance, it more than makes up for in charm. Adorable, satisfying, and simple game. Oh, and there's a sequel for this game that I'll probably give a shot at some point, so check that out too if this sounds up your alley. Alright, I played the game, fully completed it, and thoroughly talked about it. Are we good now?
Next game.
I've watched plenty of Bethesda games, and I always felt like they looked pretty rough or just kind of awkward to play, and I can say with certainty now that I was right. Regardless, I still wanted to give New Vegas a fair shot, despite my grievances with the jank. I dropped it. The jank was too much. The crashes were just too frequent, and I wasn't having a ton of fun playing it, but I definitely plan on returning someday. From the few hours I did play, the character interactions are very charming, and the music that plays on the radio is a delight. I'm sure the world that was built here has plenty to offer, but for now it'll have to wait for me to get more mods to fix the game.
Bastard! Bastard!
Look at him go! Look at him go!
Bastard!
Alright, can I go now? I need to, eat lunch, and I got a couple chores today.
Another one.
Okay. I haven't even played the first Subnautica.
Just gonna do a bit of this.
Yeah, technically I got Subnautica below 0, but if I haven't played the first game in a series, I'll count sequels as another entry for the first. I'm not into the open world survival genre at all, but Subnautica is the exception for me now. There was still plenty of tedium and frustration, but the game balances it out with a ton of great world building and stuff to read up on. Over the course of the game, you'll fill out a databank that you add new entries to by scanning things in the environment and finding abandoned message logs. The reason you're on this alien planet is because the ship you were on, the Aurora, crash landed here, and you were left stranded in your own escape pod with very few rations and a corrupted databank, so you set off into the unknown waters below you. I love the way they set this up, because you're tasked with figuring out what actually happened, whether that be through finding the scattered remains of the ship, or locating other escape pods from a distress signal, or even entering the ship itself, which in turn leads you to new areas of the map. The loop of exploring feels very natural, since a lot of the time you'll notice something that catches your eye while heading towards a marker. The game still does drip feed points of interest throughout your playthrough, but a lot of the discovery will happen because of your own curiosity, which I thought was great. During your journey you'll encounter many of fish such as the Peeper, the Boomerang, and the Reaper. Lots of them passive, a couple defensive, and some will chase you for all eternity if you so much as try and sneak a submarine past them. I personally found the AI and the aggressive fish to be a little annoying sometimes, for whatever reason Reapers just loved to follow me all the way back to my base and then stay there. I don't think they're supposed to do that, but they are meant to be a threat to deter you from traveling too far from home, and with later gear they're not that bad to zoom past or distract. On top of all the fish, there's a whole extinct alien race that left behind several towering structures, which has its whole own mystery to solve. I'd say for the most part I enjoyed this side of the story, but the discovery was so spread out that I would regularly forget what I was even doing it for. I would sometimes go several sessions without finding anything related to the aliens, and near the end of the game I basically got all the answers dumped onto me at once. It was still cool, but I wish it was less scattered so I could have appreciated it more, although I imagine that's very hard to account for in an open world setting. I have one other complaint, but it was just an annoying bug. So you get this prawn suit later in the game that lets you walk on the ocean floor and go a lot further down than your other modes of transportation, and I was able to find another alien structure with it. In the structure, there's a clump of alien ore that you can only get with the prawn suit's drill, so naturally I take my prawn suit inside, collect the ore, and then leave it while I continue to explore. When I come back though, it's magically clipped through the floor, and I have no way of getting it back out. And apparently this has been in the game for years. The only thing the devs have said is, don't take your prawn suit into the alien structures, which I thought was wild. If you're aware of something this potentially playthrough ruining, it should be high priority to fix. That was the only thing that genuinely got on my nerves and almost got me to drop the game, but I had enough resources to make a new one. And hey, this part was cool, so it makes up for all that. Bro.
It's coming from the building?
Oh, fuck.
Change course. Set thrusters to full.
As for the visuals, they're very solid. They occasionally look stunning, although I think generally they just look good most of the time, but it was not at all a detriment to my enjoyment. The fish designs in different biomes are all top-notch anyways, and the music is solid as well. It never stuck out to me too much, but it made the downtime between traveling to places a little more exciting. Definitely fits the bill of exploring an alien ocean. I didn't even really know what I was doing half the time and somehow managed to beat it in a little under 40 hours, which, yes, is still a good amount of hours, but I had a lot more fun in that time than I'd usually have playing a game in this genre, so props. Even if you've never enjoyed an open world survival game in your life, I think there's a lot to appreciate in Subnautica. Check it out. You gonna spin it?
Yes!
Jesus. Hey, you know what? I've actually been curious about this one, so I'll play it. But only because I want to, okay? I'm not intimidated by you anymore.
Okay.
This is definitely the most peculiar game for me. One thing I could say for certain, though, is Talos Principle's puzzles are fantastic. There were so many moments where I felt like a mad genius piecing everything together. The puzzles focus on objects that you can use in various ways, such as jammers that deactivate other objects when in line of sight, connectors that can carry lasers, these are used a ton, and a playback machine that lets you record your gameplay to help your future self. There's a ton of other mechanics, but I don't want to go too crazy in depth for this video. Just know they got very creative with them, and they are absolutely the reason you should get this game, if you're into Portal-style puzzles at all. There's no portals in this game though, sorry. Oh, and the reward for beating a puzzle is a realistic Tetris piece. You use them to solve grid puzzles to unlock more areas. This game's got a lot of puzzles. There's also optional stars that you can go for that unlock even more difficult puzzles later on. There were a couple I got on my own that were very clever, but most of them are kinda convoluted. A ton involve having a laser go between multiple puzzles, which got old very quickly, and a few have cryptic solutions that I would have personally never figured out. I'm glad they're optional, but the puzzles they unlock are actually really good, so I'd recommend using these hint-based guides if you go for them. Now for the other major part of this game, philosophy. The majority of it is told through these terminals that typically contain a couple things to read, such as biblical text, random chat room messages, or emails from the team that created the simulation you're currently in. Spoilers, sorry. There's also voice logs from the head of the project, Alexandra Drennan, that you can find scattered throughout most of the major zones. The other two characters act as the god and serpent of the simulation, respectively. The god, who goes by Elohim, is the first character you'll meet, although only through his disembodied voice.
You are risen from the dust, and you walk in my garden.
He never interacts with you directly, only occasionally speaking when you have made progress or if you're stuck on a puzzle, but he wants you to solve every puzzle so you may enter the gates of eternity. The serpent is disguised in the terminals as the Milton Library Assistant. Initially posited as a program that can help verify that you are human, it slowly over the course of the game reveals its true self, and starts questioning the player's beliefs unfairly, scolding you no matter what way you answer. I personally enjoyed the voice logs and serpent stuff, but everything else didn't grab me as much. I appreciate the effort that went into all of it, and I'm pretty sure most, if not all of the texts are optional, so I maybe could have treated it more like an extra thing if I felt like it, but I did read every terminal I saw. That said, I think the DLC handled the terminals in a much more interesting way. It takes place after the base game when you exit the simulation, and focuses on the people who were left behind. A couple of them have made a chat room program called Gehenna that lets them all share ASCII art, choose your own adventures, and just talk to each other about whatever interests them. So the reward for completing puzzles is getting to interact with their small community and slowly increase your status to access more of their message boards. It's super neat stuff. The DLC also scales the puzzle difficulty perfectly. They expanded on the original game seamlessly. I don't have too much else to say besides that, since it's just more of what made the base game great, although I have to mention the puzzle areas are super varied compared to the base games. Like this desert one that has a giant puzzle in the middle that you can drop down to from wherever, or this one that has a bunch of floating islands. Speaking of the visuals, they honestly hold up pretty well considering this came out in 2014. Everything's trying to look realistic, but in a way that's aesthetically pleasing. And hey, it fits with the fact that it takes place in a simulation. And the music fits the game very nicely. It's perfect staring at a puzzle for several minutes music. Like Subnautica though, it didn't really stick out, which in this case is a good thing. You usually don't want distracting music while trying to solve puzzles. So yeah, all of my nitpicks aside, I had a great time with the Talos Principle. Its age hardly shows, and I cannot recommend it enough if you're itching for these kinds of puzzles. There's a lot to enjoy besides that as well. The writing is great, even if it didn't click with me as much as I'd hoped. And you can jump between a lot of different puzzles. You're never forced to do them linearly, which I always appreciate. They announced a remaster for the original while I was working on this video that's adding a couple exciting things, so I maybe wait for that to come out if this interests you. And a sequel came out in 2023 as well. I don't plan on playing either for a while, since I'm content with what I experienced here, but I'll definitely check them out in the future.
Just get it over with. I can't say.
In Somerville, you play as the father of a small family consisting of wife, child, and dog. In the opening minutes of the game, you control the toddler, who investigates a weird glowing light, only to fall into a trash can, waking up the family. You go about doing fatherly things while your wife takes care of the kid, but as you're about to feed your dog some delicious kibble, you and your family attempt to escape to the car, but end up fleeing to the basement instead. Someone crashes into the house, and you dap them up, seeing a glimpse of them in some sort of test chamber, and then you collapse. When you awake, everyone except the dog is gone, but at least you have the power to liquefy this weird alien goop now. From this point, you venture outside to see what's happened while you were unconscious. I'm not going to say more about the plot since I think it's worth experiencing for yourself, but I do have a lot more to say regarding the gameplay. If I had to summarize how I felt in one sentence though, Somerville made me understand why Playdead stuck with one axis for their games. It's really rough. A lot of interactions felt super clunky and downright buggy at times. There's so many objects where your character clips through them weirdly or refuses to interact with them correctly, which I feel is something that should be super fine-tuned for an experience like this. It broke the immersion during a lot of otherwise really thoughtfully designed sections. A fair amount of the puzzles were very poorly communicated too. I looked up a walkthrough 2 or 3 times because of how confusing some of them were, which I hate to do. There were still good puzzles here and there, but generally I was left feeling more bothered than satisfied after figuring out what to do. The camera didn't help things either, as it almost always felt like it was lagging behind, since this game has a huge focus on cinematic appeal, which does make it cool to watch as an experience, but not as much to play. I don't know if they could have struck the right balance between looking like a movie shot and making the gameplay experience less awkward, but it definitely could have been better. Another thing that was very rough is the performance. The game will stutter or freeze pretty frequently, which as it went on led to the audio being delayed by over a second, and there's not really a way to fix it besides closing and reopening the game. And this is the last negative thing. It's more of a personal gripe that I experienced, but I still think it's worth mentioning. So there's this spot where you need to cross this river, but a giant alien device activates and scares off your dog. So I think, hey, I should go find the dog. And you can even hear its whines, but there's no way to get it back. They just expect you to leave it behind, and for whatever reason it magically shows up later in the game. This happens another time as well, and it really bothered me. Maybe I'm too much of a dog lover, and I suppose it adds to the uneasiness of the world, but then why does the dog somehow find its way back to him 2 times? It feels so much more unlikely than me actively going out of my way to find the dog and calm it down. All of that said, there are still a few things I really enjoyed about the game. Like, for one, the visual style really shines as the game progresses. At first I wasn't entirely sold on the aesthetic, but as it goes on they really flex their skills with the lighting and colors, and some of the later alien encounters are genuinely stunning. And the sound design is great. The soundtrack is nice as well. It enhances everything else wonderfully. Basically, everything excluding the gameplay was really good. I think if you can look past the roughness, there is still plenty to appreciate here. It's unfortunate that this game has so many issues. If it had a bit longer to cook, I think it could have easily been placed alongside Limbo and Inside. I mean, the co-founder of Playdead started the studio that made this game. Unfortunately, their second game got cancelled due to issues regarding their parent company, but I wish the talented people on the team the best with their future endeavors. The game goes on sale often for pretty cheap, so definitely pick it up if you're a fan of Playdead stuff. It's still worth experiencing despite its flaws in my opinion.
Congratulations, you survived the first backlog roulette. See you in the next video. Next video?